Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Nate Hochman is here. We'll talk about the ridiculous dude who looks like a mix between the Tiger King and Beetlejuice, who's now working in the White House communications office. Yet another weirdo arriving at the White House just in time for the election. Jessie Jane Duff is here. We'll talk to the Marine and the RNC rep here. She's executive director of veterans for Trump specifically, and she'll talk to us about this debate this week. Mark Paoletta joins us as we get into the excellent Justice Clarence Thomas and the left's latest attacks on him. Emma Jo Morris from Breitbart joins us at 5 o'clock as Julian Assange is now free. What's going on there? And Noah Wall from the State Financial Officers Foundation. I promise you it's way more interesting than the name of his organization. That's ahead at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. No, actually, you know what's great about Noah's topic is we're going to talk about why all of these rainbow flags are being painted on all of these crosswalks across the country. The perv flags are everywhere, advocating for child mutilation. How is that happening? How is that happening? Noah has unlocked some of the secrets as to why it's all happening in unison. It's very interesting. We'll talk to him at 5:30 about that. And as always, you can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I have to say, I do love the pre-debate excitement going on ahead of this thing on Thursday. At this point, you have Ronnie Jackson, the now congressman, previously the White House doctor under Trump. He's officially calling for a drug test for Joe Biden in his capacity as both an elected official and a medical professional, saying it is time. And who would know better in terms of the health of a United States president than a former White House doctor? So Ronnie Jackson out there with an official letter, open letter to all of the relevant Democrats. It is time for drug testing for Joe Biden ahead of this debate. They want to make sure he's not using any performance-enhancing drugs ahead of the debate. And President Trump has actually shared on his social channels images of the letter calling for this drug test. A number of Trump spokesmen have also raised this as an issue. Over on CNN, Adrienne Elrod was asked about this. She is a Biden spokeswoman. Was she formerly a Biden spokeswoman or currently a Biden spokeswoman? Well, I guess it probably doesn't matter. It's all the same. She's a lefty, a spokeswoman for Biden, asked about this idea that it's time for a drug test. And even the CNN question, they really don't ask the question. They're like, hey, can you even believe this is happening? What's your response?
President Trump asking President Biden for a drug test going into Thursday night. What's your reaction?
I mean, I don't even really know what to say about that. I worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. You know, she also debated him very effectively. He accused her of being on drugs.
So that wasn't even really a question. What's your reaction is not a question. The question would be, will Biden take a drug test? Will the campaign agree to that stipulation? Do you want to demonstrate how frivolous this request is by taking the drug test and proving that he's clean? That wasn't the question at all. What's your reaction? I don't even know what to say to that. No follow-up. She does go on to talk about how Americans really need to appreciate that they're in such a better place now that Joe Biden is president. Ignore all the chaos outside your window and in your bank account.
Look, I think you've got to, first of all, take a step back and look at what President Biden has done for the economy. He's created over 15 million jobs. GDP has been at a record high.
No,
Unemployment's been low, especially among Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. So you will see President Biden talking about his accomplishments.
Just lie after lie after lie. You don't get credit for the federal government getting out of the way of the job market that you crushed during COVID. It created all these jobs. No. As the left finally backed away from destroying jobs, people were able to get back to work. That's what happened. And then you want credit for that. I stopped killing you. So now you're living. Yeah, no, no credit for you for that. And this, in the state of this economy, they keep talking about unemployment. Oh, it's at record levels. You know what that means by now. You should. It means part-time jobs have increased dramatically because people can't afford to live in this economy. They're taking multiple jobs to make it through. And so the employment numbers, the unemployment numbers are double counting a tremendous number of people who are working multiple jobs just to survive in this economy. Full-time jobs, well, they're declining. People are losing full-time jobs in the Biden economy. And to the extent that anybody has them, it's foreign nationals who've been getting all of the job gains native-born Americans losing jobs in Biden's economy. Does that sound good to you? Of course not. The economy is in a crappy state right now. Credit card debt is at records. People are poorer now than when Joe Biden took office. Prices everywhere have exploded. The White House says, oh, they've come down. They've come down from the highs that you've created, and they're still way higher than when you took office. Janet Yellen is trying to smooth things over. She's been doing a series of interviews. Today she was on with Yahoo Finance. And to the extent that there are any problems right now in the economy, guess who she blames? You're right. It's Trump. She blames Trump.
To your point, Secretary Yellen, what impact would Donald Trump have on our economy if he's elected?
Well, look, I'm governed by the Hatch Act, and I can't get into electoral politics.
Oh, okay, then you can shut up now, right?
I guess I could just make a couple of policy-oriented comments.
Oh, she won't shut up now.
Which is that the signature policy from the Trump years was the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and it promised
and it gave us all of us a tax cut.
Investment boom, which really did not materialize. It gave huge tax breaks to corporations and to wealthy individuals, and it resulted in an enormous increase in the deficit.
Did you know that after that tax cut that was signed into law by President Trump, obviously, set to sunset at the end of next year, unless Congress does something about it, do you know that tax cut actually increased tax revenue to the federal government? Did you know that? Does anybody ever tell you that? Tax revenues went up after the Trump tax cuts. How does that happen? How do you get tax cuts and at the same time revenues go up? Well, the answer is because the economy was flourishing in the wake of the Trump tax cuts. Flourishing as a result of the Trump presidency. And so receipts went up. This is what, Art Laffer has kind of famously in Washington, D.C., he coined many years ago the Laffer curve. The idea being that there's an ideal level of taxation wherein you can increase tax revenues because people are not hindered by overzealous taxation, that the government is not punishing your productivity, such that productivity goes up and actually tax revenues, tax receipts go up. Nowadays, you might think of it as, well, that's an obvious concept. At the time, it seemed like a big... Art Laffer draws it on a napkin. That's the story anyway. And people are kind of amazed by it. And the Trump tax cuts are kind of proof of the whole theory. He cuts taxes, tax receipts go up. And so here's Janet Yellen saying, well, many of the problems we face now are the product of that. How is that a problem? That sounds fantastic. That's win-win. Taxes go down, government revenues go up as a result of it, as a sign of all that productivity.
And lowered tax revenues below historic norms.
No,
and
false.
I think it's responsible for many of the problems that we face now with our fiscal trajectory. And so that would concern me to leave all of that in place.
Yeah. One of the reasons that the left wants to get rid of the Trump tax cuts is because among the few people who saw a tax increase, rich people in Democrat-run states, rich Biden donors had a tax increase because they weren't allowed to write off all of their state and local tax deductions anymore. So, the rest of the country has been subsidizing these blue states to absurd levels. And Trump said, no, we're not doing that anymore. That's not happening. You need to govern your states in a sensible way. Have some restraint. And if you don't, get that money from your rich people, not from the rest of us. Not from the rest of us. So Biden wants this to go away. Democrats want this to go away so that they can give rich Democrats tax cuts. And nobody talks about this. That is what they're trying to do. They want to uncap salt deductions so that rich people who live in blue states can get tax cuts. That's what they want. Meanwhile, they want the rest of us, the whole country, to get tax increases in order to subsidize that profligate taxation and spending. Profligate spending in their case. What else? Oh, Janet Yellen was asked today, hey, the grocery store. When you go to the grocery store, as if Janet Yellen goes to the grocery store. Do you think Janet Yellen's been to a grocery store maybe ever in her entire life? When you go to the grocery store, there's sticker shock, right?
Secretary Yellen, have you been to the grocery store lately?
I sure have. I go every week.
It's
Yeah, right. Really? Really? That's where I get all my box wine. Where do you go? You go to the grocery store on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I go every week.
It's sticker shock, isn't it?
No.
I just would.
No. She's instantly like, no, it's not sticker shock at all. I can afford it. I don't even look at the prices, says Janet. Yeah, I guarantee you she doesn't. What's Janet Yellen worth? Okay, let's see. Let's see. What is Janet Yellen's net worth? How much is she worth? She earned more than $7 million giving speeches to big banks. That's an answer for you. Her net worth, at least according to the Senate, Yahoo Finance, of all places, confirmed her net worth at $16 million. Do you think that when she's walking in the milk aisle, she's, comparison shopping? Do you think that's happening? When she's choosing a big fat T-bone steak out, that she's trying to assess the price? Or maybe I'll go with ground beef today. You think Janet Yellen's doing that? $16 million net worth. You don't have sticker shock, do you, Janet Yellen? Because she has no idea what the stickers even say.
Secretary Yellen, have you been to the grocery store lately?
I sure have. I go every week.
It's sticker shock, isn't it?
No.
I just, when you look at shipping costs, those have come down. Global food commodity prices have also come down, but food prices still remain high. I know they're not rising at the rate that they were last year, but they're still up 20% from pre-COVID.
Yeah, so the Yahoo Finance lady almost got it exactly right, except it's actually worse than that. It's not 20%. Over the last 4 years, grocery prices have risen at least 25%, about on average, about 25%. Some categories like eggs, well, they're way up. They're up nearly 50% from their prior prices. And there are a bunch of categories like that. Beef, steak, way up in terms of the actual prices that people are paying. So essential proteins, those would be the things that so many of us rely on just to, keep our families alive. Those are way up in price. The sticker shock is totally real. Totally real. Janet Yellen doesn't feel it. Sticker shock? No. There's no sticker shock for me. And there she is. So it'll be interesting. We'll see what comes up in this debate this week. Of course, the claim is going to be, well, the economy's great. Joe Biden's going to try and insist that with a straight face. The economy's great. And Donald Trump is going to have to eviscerate that live on stage. And he'll be going 1 versus 3, as you know. In a moment, I want to talk about another element of this debate, which got an update today. Judge Juan Merchan in New York, he has modified Trump's gag order, which is freeing him up to discuss certain things come Thursday. But there's something really important that Trump is not allowed to discuss. As his First Amendment rights are curtailed going on to that debate stage, no big deal. It's just probably the most important thing that Trump should be allowed to talk about. Well, Judge Juan Merchan, the man of endless rulings about what Donald Trump is allowed to do in public, has today added another one, a 5-page ruling released today. The media is now saying, Trump is free of his gag order. He's liberated from all these things. This is awful. This is a head fake. This is such a head fake. The Associated Press, judge alters Trump's gag order, letting him talk about witnesses, jury, after hush money conviction, emphasizing that Merchan modified Donald Trump's gag order. Modified it just days before Trump's debate Thursday with President Joe Biden. And it clears the presumptive Republican nominee to again go on the attack against his former lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen. Porn actor Stormy Daniels, isn't it actress? When did we start saying actor for women? They're two different categories. You have an actor and an actress. It's technically the same job, but it connotes the gender of the job. Anyway, porn actress Stormy Daniels and other witnesses. Also, actress is kind of generous for porn, I would say. Trump was convicted in New York on May 30th of falsifying records to cover up a potential sex scandal, making him the first ex-president convicted of a crime. In a 5-page ruling Tuesday, Merchan wrote that the gag order was meant to protect the integrity of the judicial proceedings, and the protections for witnesses and jurors no longer applied now that the trial has ended and the jury has been discharged. What? Wait a second. I thought their lives were at risk. If Trump criticized them, I thought their lives were at risk. Don't you want to protect them? Why is he free now to talk about Stormy Daniels? He's free to talk about Stormy Daniels all he wants. But who is he not free to talk about? Merchan said it has been his, quote, strong preference to continue barring Trump from commenting about jurors whose names have not been made public, but that he couldn't justify doing so. The judge did leave in place a separate order that prohibits Trump and his lawyers from disclosing the identities of individual jurors or their home or work addresses. Trump lawyer Todd Blanche said after the verdict, the defense team has destroyed that information. Merchan also left in place a ban on Trump commenting about court staffers, the prosecution team, and their families until he is sentenced, writing that they must continue to perform their lawful duties free from threats, intimidation, harassment, and harm. That portion of the gag order does not prohibit Trump from commenting about the judge himself or District Attorney Alvin Bragg, whose office prosecuted the case. Okay, that's been the case throughout this. The gag order did not stop Trump from criticizing the judge or Alvin Bragg specifically. But guess what it did stop him from doing? It stopped him from criticizing and talking about Biden's connection to the case. That connection is a man called Matthew Colangelo. Number 3 at the Biden Department of Justice, leaves his job just to join Alvin Bragg's case against Trump, to prosecute Trump. And so every time Trump has talked about the Biden connection, he hasn't been able to give you the connecting tissue. He's talking about Matthew Colangelo. That's who he's talking about. Any number of us in public who are aware of this have been talking about this, but Trump himself is not allowed to. Trump's campaign, not allowed to. The people who work for Trump, not allowed to. All have a gag order imposed on them by a judge who has no respect for the First Amendment and definitely not the American voter. So, okay, great. Trump can talk about Stormy Daniels. All this is designed to do is to get Trump to talk about the salacious stuff that was brought up in the trial. But he's not allowed to address Biden's role in all of this. So going into this debate Thursday, you see all these media outlets all saying, oh, Trump now free to talk about these things going into the debate. No, this is a head fake. He's literally precluded from talking about the connecting tissue between Biden and the hit job on him in New York. That's the story today. Buried in this Associated Press reporting, buried in that modified gag order, but surfaced here. Right on the Vince Coglianese Show. Coming up, Nate Hochman is going to be with us. We're going to talk to him about the new weirdo who's working at the White House. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Jessie Jane Duff talks to us, Director of Veterans for Trump. We've got a debate coming up this week. Jessie Jane will have some thoughts on that. Mark Paoletta is here at 4:30. We talk Clarence Thomas with him. Emma Jo Morris from Breitbart here at 5 o'clock as Julian Assange is free and Hillary Clinton is ticked off. And Noah Wall will be here at 5:30 from the State Financial Officers Foundation. He's taking a look into why all these rainbow flags are being painted on crosswalks across the country. And no, it's not to celebrate God's promise to not flood the earth anymore. That's not what this is about. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The freak show continues at the Biden White House. This week, the White House has hired a dude who looks something like a cross between the Tiger King and Beetlejuice. And I'm not kidding. There's photos of this guy. He's got this kind of creepy Tiger King stash, and he's dressed in an all black and white striped suit. You'll see pictures of him wearing kind of fishnet shirts with his nipples sticking out. And, of course, he is obviously right out of central casting for a Biden communication staffer. But the White House right now is in damage control over this guy because apparently, in addition to being an over-the-top cartoon character, he's also deeply hateful. He's super bigoted when it comes to things like, I don't know, white people, capitalism, the police. He hates all of those things, and he's expressed it a lot in public. For more on this, I want to bring in Nate Hochman now. He's a senior advisor to America 2100 and a writer for the American Spectator as well. Nate, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Vince.
Nate, tell me about this guy, the Associate Comms Director for the Biden White House. His name is Tyler Cherry. Who is he?
Yeah, it's too bad that this is a radio show because we can't communicate to your listeners just exactly what this guy looks like. Everyone, if they're curious, should Google Tyler Cherry. You'll see exactly what we're talking about. I mean, like you said, he's right out of central casting just in terms of his look. But he was recently promoted to the comms team, the communications team in the Biden White House, which is hilarious because his Twitter feed for the past, I don't know, decade has just been a long stream of just pick your radical campus lefty cause. And he's right out there on the vanguard, defund the police, all the Palestine stuff, abolish ICE, open borders, go down the list. He's got a tweet or 100 tweets for every single one of them. And he's a comms guy for the Biden White House. He's not just some random staffer. He's their front-facing communications staffer. And he's a total out-and-out radical.
Yeah, for sure. He's compared police to slave patrols, modern-day police. He says they're slave patrols. He's calling for abolishing the police. He's calling for abolishing voter ID. He's compared it to the Democrat practice of poll taxes designed to keep black people from voting. He's routinely just looked at pictures of white people and thought, there's too many white people in this photo. He's a white guy, by the way. I should point out, he's just a white guy. But he makes up for it by being fantastic. And which by the way, I'm cribbing that line right from the Free Beacon. That's how they talk about Pete Buttigieg. He's white, but he makes up for it by being gay is one of my favorite lines ever. Ever. I love that line. But this guy, he is, I don't know, he's almost like whatever they tell him to say, he says it.
Right. I was going through his tweets just because I found it amusing. And one of the things I surfaced was just what you're talking about, where he has dozens and dozens of tweets of just quote tweeting or responding to pictures of random events, Bernie Sanders rallies, Trump rallies, CNN panels, and just going, there are too many white people here. he just finds whatever, event was happening this day and just quote tweets it and goes, I feel like there are too many white people here. Like it's an absurd practice.
Yes.
But down the line, it's every single issue. He's almost a parody, sort of funhouse mirror version of what campus leftist politics are.
Well, it's also kind of a sign, like he's a white guy and he's like saying there's too many white people here. It's kind of a sign that he's mentally ill, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably a good description of anyone who holds this genre of ideology or politics.
Yeah.
He's like, obviously, if you actually took the too many white people here ideology to its logical conclusion, he shouldn't have a job, right? If he really wanted to make space for people of color, he should give up his job to somebody who wasn't white. But obviously, it's only that there are too many white people in other places. Yeah. When it applies to him and his job, of course, it never applies.
So what we're seeing now is he has deleted basically all of the stuff that you noticed. In fact, all of those pictures of white people that he thought that he had these bigoted attitudes towards, he's now deleting the evidence of all of this. He's also released a statement in the form of a tweet saying past social media posts from when I was younger, which is a weird phrase because literally every social media post that you've ever had in your past is from when you were, quote, younger, do not reflect my current views, period. I support this administration's agenda and will continue my communications work focused on our climate and environmental policies, he writes. So what does this tell you? What does it tell you that he's deleting all of this? Is this a sign that he's ashamed of his past behavior, or is it just a memory hole exercise?
Yeah, obviously it's a memory hole exercise. After I posted the screenshots of those white people tweets, within 45 or 60 minutes, he had just nuked hundreds and hundreds of tweets, every single tweet that had the word white in it, including tweets that were just about the White House. It's funny because he's a White House communications staffer. Mm-hmm. They were all gone. He just wiped the slate clean. But yeah, no, it's the obvious sort of follow-up question when he says, I don't believe those things anymore is, okay, what views do you specifically not hold anymore? And why did you change your mind? Yeah. Of course, he's never going to answer that question. But the simple fact is he hasn't changed his mind. And in a big part, the reason that he got the job that he did is because he holds those.
Okay, that's an important element here. So he's a florid radical in public, and he has been for a long time. And so any organization worth its salt, especially one as high profile as the White House, especially one that's hiring him to do the communications on behalf of the White House, they knew who this guy was, and this is explicitly why they hired him.
Right. Look, I'm a young guy. I went to a left-wing college campus. If you get to know anyone in all of these lefty progressive activist groups, whether it's the climate stuff, the race stuff, the immigration stuff, you take your pick of the lefty cause.
Yeah.
They're all like this. This guy is like, you can find hundreds, if not thousands, of versions of this guy, carbon copies. in all of the big lefty activist groups. Everyone under the age of 30 who's in these lefty circles is this guy, effectively. And that's the hiring pool for the Biden administration. Those are the sort of young progressive foot soldiers that they're hiring. So obviously this guy got nabbed because he was a communications director and people paid attention. But you can bet your entire bank account on the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds of carbon copies of him everywhere in the Biden administration.
But look, if this was my ideology and I was trying to advance it, I wouldn't hire a red flag that looked like this guy. This guy's coming out. He's got the fishnet shirts on and the nipples sticking out and the porn stash. What is it with these lefties overly sexualizing everything? It's like this. Everything is like this big narcissistic sort of sexualized routine. And it's not. This wasn't like some guy who looks like some plain Jane guy. He's got radical views, but. It's a gigantic red flag. This guy is like another Sam Brinton character who's stealing luggage from people at airports all across the country. They have these over-the-top characters who are deeply radical and deeply insane, and then they hire them. Why?
Well, that's exactly right. Sam Brinton is one of a dozen names that you could come up with of guys that anyone who pays attention to the Biden administration know are just like this guy. And those people are strategic errors for the Biden administration because most Americans are sort of viscerally repulsed just on a visual level by these people. So it doesn't help the Biden administration strategically to have those guys making headlines. But the important thing to understand is that in no small part, the Biden White House's entire project has been taking these people's views and sanitizing them just enough that they can kind of repurpose them and launder them to the American people as some sort of moderate centrist agenda. Everything that this White House has done since day one are effectively versions of this guy's views. They just are done with like an old aging septuagenarian who has the capacity to sound sometimes like somebody who isn't a radical, but it's the same exact political project all the way down.
But I also think that part of this seems to be that they're trying to stretch our attitudes to normalize the absurd in huge ways.
Yep.
So remember that the guy who had breast implants who went and visited the White House and then took his shirt off and was dancing around on the South Lawn taking photos and was literally invited by the White House, disgraced the whole institution, after the White House was like, this is a bad thing. We won't allow this person to come back. But, that honestly, their consternation was pretty muted about all of this. And it once again felt like the same dog and pony show. Like the characters change ever so slightly, but the reality is they're constantly trying to normalize some of the most absurd and salacious things you could possibly imagine.
100%. And every time conservatives make the mistake of noticing that they're trying to do this, the story always becomes, conservative backlash to X. Conservatives are losing their minds or, are freaking out. But it's quite obvious what they are trying to do. And by the way, if you listen to these people, what they're saying publicly most of the time, the kinds of people who showed up at the White House to do that, guys like this, they relish the fact that it's offensive. It's meant to be offensive to Christians, to white people, to conservatives, to people in middle America. That is not a bug, it's a feature. They want to be offensive. They hold people that they're offending in contempt. And part of what they're doing is a kind of humiliation ritual. It's meant to demoralize people about the fact that their institutions like the White House are being profaned like this. It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, but it's one thing to live your own life this way and then to be resentful that people don't accept you for who you are and like kind of be navigating through those insecurities. But it's another thing to then evangelize all of this, to be like, actually, no, this is the normal way to live your life. I have a story coming up today on the that I'm going to hopefully be able to get to into some detail, but the international transgender organization known as WPATH, which sets all of these guidelines for how people can be mutilated and how they can be affirmed in their delusions and all of these things. They were taking orders from this guy Richard Levine, now known as Admiral Rachel Levine. This is a guy who's play acting as a woman in the Biden administration, wearing military-style uniforms, who was pressuring WPATH to get rid of its minimum age restrictions when it comes to gender mutilation for children. And this is all coming out today. A Canadian researcher getting the details, the government documents on this, and it is horrifying. And so it's not just that, Nate Hockman, that these are people who are trying to change our attitudes by being ridiculous in public. They're trying to evangelize their ridiculousness.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very much about wearing the sort of old American institutions and traditions, ideas as a skin suit. They're not just tearing down statues of Christopher Columbus or George Washington, or not celebrating Easter or Christmas or Columbus Day or whatever. They're replacing all of these traditions and ideas and public morality with a new one, right? So instead of Easter, you get Transgender Day of Remembrance. Instead of Columbus Day, you get Indigenous Day of Mourning. Instead of Thanksgiving, you get another Indigenous Peoples Day. You can go down the line. Instead of July 4th, you get Juneteenth. Instead of the national anthem, the Stars and Stripes, you get the Black national anthem. Every single American tradition, every single unifying symbol of American identity and pride is being hollowed out and replaced with the new state religion, which is the race stuff, obviously, but also this LGBT radicalism and degeneracy that is now effectively the official position of the Biden White House.
Yeah, and it's a war. It's an openly declared war against your family, which is which people need to recognize. Hey, Nate Hawkman, thank you from America 2100 and the American Spectator. Thank you for diving deep as you so often do on these issues. Thank you, Nate. This effort by the left to normalize the absurd. Another example of that today was literally on CNN just a couple of hours ago. You had a female anchor interviewing a man dressed as an ugly woman. Literally, she was interviewing this guy, a drag queen. Oh, tell us about how horrible your life is because the right keeps attacking you. And then the guy goes on, the woman is interviewing the man and acting like he's the victim. Meanwhile, the dude is victimizing her on national television. He's got woman face on, pretending to be a lady. Listen to this. This is crazy.
I'm curious for you, first of all, what this day means to you. And second of all, have both Democrats and Republicans agreed to meet with you?
Yes, we will be meeting with both Democrats and Republicans. And I'm really excited to go speak with all of our lawmakers about the attacks that we're seeing on our LGBTQ community. It's so important to talk about.
By the way, he's dressed in like a pink rubber suit. It looks like he's a stewardess or something. He's got like this oversized white collar. He's got the most ridiculous eye makeup on you could possibly imagine. Eyelashes that reach, they basically touch the camera as he's flapping. And she's treating him like he's the victim here, instead of that he's literally giving her a gigantic middle finger for being a woman in the first place.
And to discuss protections for our queer community.
Can I let you listen to the current sentiment that's being shared by former President Donald Trump, who, of course, is running for re-election? Here it is.
Here it is.
We're going to take care of our capital. On day one, I will sign a new executive order to cut federal funding of any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content onto the lives of our children.
Stop. I'm already voting for him. You don't need to convince me. So what does Trump say? Trump says, stop abusing these kids. Stop sexualizing children. Stop putting boys into girls' locker rooms. Stop putting boys on the girls' sports teams. Stop screwing around in this way and imperiling children. What is wrong with you? Why are you putting porn in schools? What the hell is that about? So Trump raises a bunch of obvious points, and CNN is outraged.
In those three things, he mentions what he calls transgender insanity. If he's voted in as the next president, what will that mean to you?
First of all, I thought drag queens are not transgender. What is she even asking this person that question for? I thought drag queens were just dudes who dressed up as chicks. And we're in on the joke. It's supposed to be absurd.
We already see so many attacks on our queer community. I already don't feel safe in my own hometown, just dressed in drag like this. And it's very scary for queer people to exist in a time where we see this kind of rhetoric being pushed by our lawmakers and the people who should care about other issues that actually affect the American people, other than attacking our community, our LGBTQIA plus.
Remember that study we did it on the air that people who identify as transgender are less likely to be murdered than the general population. Remember that? We feel so unsafe. This is yet another delusion going on here. An attempt to normalize it all by the American left, which includes CNN, which, by the way, I should point out, is hosting a presidential debate this week. Coming up, Mark Paoletta is going to join us in the next hour. We talk to him about Justice Clarence Thomas, the left's new ridiculous attacks on him, and so much more, including your calls on the Vince Coglianese Show. Stay with us.